Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, as the case may be, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining me live here on Facebook. I've never done anything like this before, so it's kind of exciting. Never done a live announcement on Facebook. We'll get into the meat here of what this is all about. As most of you probably know, back in November, I did publish a book called The Man with the September Face. And the response has been tremendous. But that is not why I've asked everyone to join me today. The reason why I've asked everyone to join me here is because what nobody knew, and I mean nobody, not even those close to me, what nobody knew is that whole time that I was working on that book, in fact, I was working on two totally different novels at the same time. Now, my original intent had been to release them much close together, but it didn't quite work out that way. Still, the turnaround is pretty swift here, but I now have another book that is ready. Now, as I said, it's an entirely different kind of book. What is this book about? What have I kept under wraps? Well, probably the best way I can position this would be to read directly from the prologue from this project that I've been working on. In 2013, it was announced that the remains of Richard III, the final ruler of Great Britain's Plantagenet dynasty, had at last been found. This declaration of discovery, made by the University of Leicester, created a worldwide sensation. Researchers and scientists, upon hearing the news, decided that they should set out to settle a centuries-old dispute, whether the grave at a certain Stratford church did in fact contain the remains of the man widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language. However, in a classic case of unintended consequences, the investigators soon found themselves in a maelstrom of deceit, a blanket of nightmares, and a curtain of blood. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited to share with you my newest book, Shakespeare's Skull, a novel in 5 acts. What I want to let everyone know about this book, I'm particularly excited about it for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think this is some of my best work yet, honestly. Secondly, I asked for and received some incredible help in the making of this book. It goes to show it never hurts to ask. Some of the help that I got in the preparation of this book was unbelievable, and I'd like to expand on that. Now, the statement that I had that no one knew about this project is strictly true, with one exception, my editor. I did have an editor, and I'll talk about her in a moment. What I did was I reached out to some people, and I did not give them the full picture of what it was that I was doing, but I told them that I did need some information. I needed some help for research purposes. I positioned it that I was an author, and I just needed some help. Well, specifically, the folks that I reached out to and was astonished that I actually heard back. First of all, I should make clear that while this is a work of fiction, there is a kernel of truth to the initial portion of the story that Shakespeare's Skull is missing. Now, what had happened was a few years ago, there was a team of scientists that were performing some tests on the actual grave at Stratford, and they happened to stumble into evidence that strongly suggested that the skull might in fact be missing. Now, there never was, in reality, there never was a specific search for Shakespeare's skull. It was something that they just stumbled on. In my book, my work of fiction, it's the focus. It's a central focus of the book, the search for the skull. But it was something that they stumbled into, and I didn't understand a lot about the technology. What was used was a form of ground penetrating radar that was used to scan the graves. There was a lot about it that I just simply didn't understand. So I tracked down, reached out to, and actually got in touch with the geophysicist. Her name is Erica Utsi. She is the woman who actually rolled the radar over Shakespeare's grave and made or helped to make this discovery that the skull might indeed be missing. She proved to be an incredible amount of help for me. She was incredibly generous and gracious, and sent me links and information to papers that she had co-written that get into great depth about the technology. Hopefully she will forgive me for some of the liberties that I took in the book with the technology. Case in point, this sort of technology, it's not something that can be interpreted in real time. Once you've made the scan, it can take weeks for the results to come back. It's not something you can really read off a screen in real time. Well, from a dramatic standpoint, it wasn't interesting to me to have scientists sitting around waiting for weeks for results to come in. So what I did was I sped it up, and in real time they're seeing what's going on. And hopefully she'll forgive me for the little bit of liberty that I took. But a lot of what she described as she explained it to me is in fact in the book. And it is quite interesting how the technology works. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my editor. I do want to talk about my editor, and her name is Jerry Walker. She is an independent author. I've known Jerry for about 6 years. We first met, I think, on Twitter. Independent authors, it's a very small community of very cool, very generous people. And independent authors look out for each other. And Jerry, through nothing but her own generosity, back in 2012, she was instrumental in helping me get the word out, the publicity started for The Wizard Murders, which was my first crime fiction novella. She was incredibly generous in helping me get the word out on that book, and I never forgot that. And I thought, down the road, I want to hire her properly as an editor because I knew that was something that she did do, in fact, professionally. I sat down and was prepared to have her embark on this with me. And unfortunately, at the time, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was greatly concerned. And I had said to her, Jerry, I understand if you can't take any new work on right now. I totally understand. I had very much wanted you to be a part of this particular project for many reasons. But if it's something that you just can't take on, I won't hold it against you. To my surprise, she said, no, I'm going to do it. She weaved her time between looking at my book and treatments that she underwent. She faced surgery, chemo, the whole nightmare. But the good news is she did complete her work on the book and she beat the cancer. So there was a double bit of good news there that she was not only victorious in keeping her promise on the book, but she beat the cancer, which is fantastic. Jerry, thank you. Among the other help getting back to some of the help that I had gotten with this book, I do want to give credit where credit's due. I do so in the acknowledgments, but I want to do that additionally here. I had some questions about how the work of Shakespeare is cataloged, the current complete works, and how they're cataloged and handled. And I reached out to and heard back from the archives assistant at Shakespeare's Globe and Library Archive in London. His name is Philip Mills Smith. He was very generous in his time and help in explaining how those records and papers are maintained. I can't get into too much detail of how he did help me initially without spoiling some of the information of the book, so I won't go much farther than that. But he was a great help, and I thank him for his very generous time and patience with me. I was floored to hear back from him, and he was a big, wonderful help. And again, that's the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London, that was kind enough to respond to my request for some information. Also, I visited the church in Stratford that I mentioned in the prologue. I actually visited the church back in 1986. I'll never forget making the walk up the road to the church with my father. It was an overcast day, and it's one of those memories that is just burned as clear as I can see the back of my hand. It's one of those cherished memories. But I wanted to make sure, that being said, that my mind wasn't playing tricks on me with some of the details of the church, both interior and exterior. So I reached out, once again, to the staff at Holy Trinity Church in Stratford. And do you want to know that they did respond? They were a tremendous help in filling me in on some of the blanks regarding the topography of the location, the details of the stained glass work in the building. They were tremendously helpful. And there's a link here in the book that is run by the Friends of the Church. There's a neat little website that you can visit where you can light a candle, if you like, in Shakespeare's memory and make a small donation to the preservation of that church. That church is where not only where Shakespeare is buried, but it's also the church where he was baptized. Absolutely rich in history. I wanted to make sure I had all the details right, and they were incredibly helpful in providing me the information that I had, or the information that I had questions about. Also, I asked for some help. I needed some help. I had some questions about the night sky. Let's put it that way. The constellation, the stars. Had some very specific scientific questions. And I reached out to a gentleman who was very helpful. His name is Joe Rayo. He is, among other things, a meteorologist. He is the associate astronomer at the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. His boss is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now, I should make perfectly clear, I did not speak to Neil deGrasse Tyson, I wish, but I did speak to Joe Rayo. And he was enormously helpful and patient in explaining to me some questions that I had as it relates to specific night skies. And again, I can't get too specific here without getting into some spoiler territory, but I do want to give credit where credit is due. First of all, I was forward to hear back from him when I reached out to the Hayden Planetarium. That was a thrill in itself, but the fact that he spent so much time with me on the phone to explain thoroughly any questions that I had as it related to that, and I can't thank them enough. Finally, last but certainly not least at all, I have to thank my mother. I think my mother's still watching right now. Mom, as you may remember, about a year ago, I needed some help in creating a fictional British university. The reason for that was I was at an impasse. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I needed to create something. I gave her an outline of some ideas that I had, and without knowing it, she provided some information that ultimately pointed me towards creating one hell of an ending for the book. And Mom, thank you. Like I said, last, certainly not least, your contribution is not to be overlooked. You were very helpful in helping me create what I desperately needed, which was a fictional British university. I also should point out, this is very important, every actor that I've worked with over the past 30 years, every actor that I've worked with in bringing Shakespeare to the stage, they are going to probably, without a doubt, recognize a few of the anecdotes as they are related by one of the characters in the book. I had a lot of fun weaving some of these anecdotes into my fictional story. That was a great joy, because Shakespeare is always a great challenge and a great joy, and it makes for some fantastic and lasting stories. And it was my pleasure to be able to weave some of those into my book. So again, thank you so much for joining me.